when we hear the Christmas story and have this time of year, if there's something even more profound going on. It seems like when a Christmas story is read, there's something that taps into the deepest longings and expectations and hopes and dreams of our heart. It resonates on an even deeper level that goes beyond nostalgia. It's why, for some, hearing the Christmas story, or just thinking about God becoming a human being and dying for us on the cross to save us, it feels kind of like remembering a long-forgotten dream. I want to introduce you to two people who thought that actually was going on. There's something more than nostalgia going on when we hear the Christmas story. One is J.R. Tolkien. I'm sure some of you know him. He was the author of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. He's a famous Oxford professor who was a specialist in literature. And he was good friends with another, even more famous Oxford professor, also a professor of literature, and his name is C.S. Lewis. And both these guys are Christians. In fact, Tolkien was instrumental in bringing C.S. Lewis to faith. They're both Christians, and they're both experts in mythology. And they had some really interesting things to say about the relationship between mythology on the one hand and the Christian faith on the other, especially the Christmas story. And it kind of explains why it is that the Christmas story can connect with us on such a deep and profound level. When most people hear the word myth, they just think it's untrue. In modern times, we sort of equate myth with something that's just made up. But Tolkien and Lewis had a very, very different understanding. They believe that the great mythology throughout history, it expresses the deepest intuitions and hopes and longings and yearnings of the human heart. In that sense, mythology can be very true. It tells us something profound about ourselves and about our view of the world and our sense of what is true. And one of the reasons why Tolkien and Lewis believe this is because they took seriously the Gospel of John, his version of the Christmas story. And John tells us that before the Word ever became incarnate, the Word was shining on everybody. There hasn't been a person in history that the Word wasn't seeking to shine His light on, to bring some truth there, insofar as they would let it. In fact, Paul tells us in Acts 17 that from the very beginning, God has been working in every human heart to get people to yearn for Him, reach out for Him, and possibly find Him, though He's not far from any of us. God's always been active in that. And C.S. Lewis and Tolkien believe that the greatest mythology in the world reflects that light. It expresses the light coming into people's lives. And for them, it's not surprising then, since the same Word that became incarnate, became a human being in the person of Jesus Christ, that same Word has always been shining light on people. It wasn't surprising to them that sometimes you can find faint echoes between some of the mythology that you find throughout world history and the story of Jesus. The same God is revealing Himself to both groups. And so you find in the literature, mythological literature, of a lot of different cultures throughout history, you'll find echoes like stories of God coming down, a God coming to rescue human beings, or stories of heroes being born to virgins, or stories of dying and rising gods. From the view of C.S. Lewis and Tolkien, that's to be expected, because it's a reflection, a distant reflection of the light that was fully embodied and fully revealed in the person of Jesus Christ. So these myth makers, they didn't know the true version of God becoming a human being and dying to save us, but they intuited, they had like premonitions of it, and so you see that story kind of echoed in different mythologies of the world. The difference is this. When C.S. Lewis looked into it, and this is why he became a Christian, he found that there's compelling reasons for believing that the Christmas story, the gospel, is actually true. It's rooted in history. It actually happened. And so he believed that he refers to Jesus as the myth becoming fact. Myth becomes history. And in his view, the Christmas story is the fulfillment of all these other stories. It is the true version of the story that all these other mythic stories are pointing to. And it fulfills the hopes and the dreams that are expressed in these other mythic stories, because Jesus is the answer and the fulfillment of those hopes and dreams. In Jesus, it actually happens. One other thing that Tolkien and Lewis believed, and that is that the story of God becoming a human being, while they believe it's historical, because there's really good evidence for that. And by the way, if you're interested in looking into that kind of evidence, we've got several books in our bookstore that talk a lot about that, so you might want to check that out. But even though they thought it's historical, Tolkien and Lewis said that it's the greatest myth ever told. It's the greatest story ever told. And the rationale is this. What we really long for in the deepest crevice of our heart, what we ache for, is it's all about love. And the Christmas story, if we understand it rightly, is the greatest love story that's ever been told. In fact, it's the greatest love story that ever could be told.